Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. Today, my friends, we're going to learn about the joy of choice. I love that title, and you're going to learn more about it with my guest today, Michelle Segar. Now, for those of you that don't know who she is, she's an award-winning lifestyle coach and sustainable behavior change researcher at the University of Michigan, I believe in Ann Arbor. Is that correct? Ann Arbor, Michigan. Love that little place of the world, even though I haven't been there yet. It's on my bucket list. For nearly 3 decades, she has pioneered methods to create sustainable, healthy behavior change that are being used to boost patient health, employee well-being, and gym membership retention. That's pretty cool. She is an advisor to leading global organizations and frequently interviewed in major media outlets like the New York Times, NPR, and the Wall Street Journal, among many others. She has 2 books, but her second book, which is out right now, it's called The Joy of Choice, which showcases the exciting new science and method for breaking down all or nothing thinking and cultivating the in-the-moment decisions that support self-care, health, and well-being. Michelle, can I welcome you so much to the Storybox podcast today?
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. The joy of choice. I cannot wait to dive further into that in just a moment. But before we do that, my very first question for you is, what does success look like for you?
You know, that is such a wonderful question. Success for me is feeling like I'm creating thinking and solutions that are both pragmatic and useful to individuals and organizations, but also that are based on science. And so I want to help people. And I want success also means being creative. It means reading and doing research as the paint of my creations and not being so busy that I can't take a leisurely walk. So that's what success looks like to me.
For you, wanting to help people and learning more about science and that area of your life, when did you discover that you wanted to help people with these science-backed evidence and research? When did you discover that?
Well, something very specific happened. In 1993, I started my first master's degree in kinesiology. And by the way, I didn't even know what that word meant.
I can barely say it. Don't worry.
I didn't even know what it meant. I knew it had something to do with exercise, but the word didn't know what it meant. Anyway, it means it's about movement. And I was doing my first kind of real study as a master's thesis, and we were looking to see if exercise could benefit cancer survivors. And so, one group was randomized to exercise, the other group didn't get exercise, and we compared outcomes. And we found that the group who exercised did better psychologically. And that's what we set out to study. We got a teeny little grant that supported it. But one of my mentors suggested that we do focus groups like 3 months after the study was over. And so we did. And the participants sat around and talked about exercise and being in the study and smiled. And I thought that we hadn't just done good research, that we'd actually helped people. But I was wrong, because almost everyone had stopped exercising when our study ended. And when I asked them why, they said, oh, they were too busy. They had work and they had families. And they were not being treated for cancer. They were about 5 years out of treatment, but they were too busy to exercise. And I thought, wow, if people who have faced a life-threatening illness didn't feel comfortable prioritizing their own self-care through exercise, then we have a real problem in society. And I was like, it's my problem and I'm going to solve it. And so everything I've done, and so that those focus groups were in February of 1994. So it's almost been 3 decades since I had that insight, and it's driven everything I've done since then.
For someone that has the habit at the moment that they don't like exercise, how would you change their habit or their behaviors around getting them to exercise and making exercise good for them, or letting them know that?
Sure. So, well, I have two things to say about that. First of all, one of the things I talk about in the book is my concern that the whole idea of habit formation, so the kinds of, not a regular behavior, but the kind of behavior we're trying to put on autopilot, that it's been overgeneralized away from simple behaviors like flossing to more complex behaviors like exercising and healthy eating. So I just want to say that, since you use the word habit, I think we need to really think about the words we use when we're trying to help either ourselves or people take care of themselves in ways they can sustain. Because if we're not precise with the word we're using, then our actions also won't be precise. So that's why it's called the joy choice, because it is about our choices right now and now and now and now. So that's kind of the background. Now, your question is actually pretty complicated, because there are a lot of reasons why people don't like to exercise. But I'm going to categorize them and tell you two primary reasons why people don't like to exercise. And the first thing I should say is it's no one's fault that they don't like to exercise. It's not because they're not athletic. It's not because they're failures. It's not because their PE teachers shame them. It's because as a society, we have been taught to exercise in ways that sets us up to make it punishing. So that's what I want people to know. It's not your fault if you hate it. Here's the deal. Research shows that our primary reasons for initiating a behavior like exercise determine the quality of motivation, whether we have high quality motivation, and basically that means whether we want to do it and whether we value doing it, or low quality motivation. And that reflects feeling controlled, like it's like a should. And so research suggests, and this was some of my earlier research and also the coaching I've been doing with people, that when we initiate exercise to lose weight and even to improve our health, that turns exercise into a should, or what I call a chore. So people don't like exercise because their reasons convert it into something that feels like a chore. And the second part of that answer is that when our reasons aim to especially lose weight, and this is counterproductive, it gets us to choose types of exercises and physical activities that are punishing, because we're trying to burn calories. That's the goal. So it doesn't really matter what it feels like if we're trying to burn calories. So it's because of those two things, our reasons set us up to not like it, to feel like a chore, and then we exercise in ways that don't feel good. And so the solution is to hone in on those two things so we can transform exercise from a chore into a gift.
How much of everything you just spoke about, how much of that is actually based around motivation versus choice?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. So the research that I was just talking about is focused on motivation. However, motivation is a driver of choice and behavior. So, and the other thing that it's interesting that we're getting there. So we're used to thinking of motivation as the be all end all resource because it's a driver. But again, I'm going to repeat this because it's so important. Our primary reasons for initiating a behavior literally have a domino effect on whether we develop high quality or low quality motivation. So motivation isn't the foundation of whether we're going to keep doing it. It's our primary reason. But these are issues related to motivation, and they're not related to feasibility, because that's a completely different issue.
Yeah. Because I could have all the motivation in the world to go and exercise in the morning, but I make the choice to stay in bed. Or I can make the choice to get up. I can do the opposite, have no motivation at all, and I'll just go and do it. So that's my choice to do it without any motivation. So I like how you were talking about how motivation is a driving force. But for me, and this is just me, motivation isn't necessary for me in order to make the choice to go and exercise, if that makes sense. But for a lot of other people, it might actually be needed to exercise.
Well, from the framework that I'm coming from, you might not think of it as motivation, but I don't think we do anything unless we have to do it, if we're not motivated. So I would have to push back a little bit there. I think you have a motivation. It may not be, maybe you're bored and you want something to do. That's still a motivation. So maybe it's semantics that we're talking about.
How about the habit of every single day getting up? Is that still based around motivation, you think? Well,
that is what I was talking about at the beginning. So if someone is exercising with I'm going to put automatic in front of the habit, because that's the type of habit that you're talking about. And my husband is actually someone who does that. And he's what I call in my book a habiter. And people who are successful with doing a complex behavior with automaticity, so we don't have to think about it, tend to also have very strong discipline. They tend to be very organized. They tend to not have a lot of hubbub or unexpected things happen in their lives. And the alternative to habiters is an unhabiter, or someone who has a lot of hubbub and might be unorganized like me, and might need to change things up, and might be the point person for the children like me. Although my husband is very involved in parenting. So that now we're getting at somewhat different personality tendencies, and the habit or unhabiter that I talk about in the book, that was a framework I created for fun and to help people think more critically. Like, am I trying to change my behavior in ways that actually fit with my personality? Or am I just kind of following what I'm supposed to be doing, but it actually isn't a good fit with who I am?
Your husband sounds very much like me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Very simple.
And so in those circumstances, like an active motivation isn't the driver. It's the unconscious automatic cue. He sleeps in his exercise clothes.
Yeah, same.
So then you too.
I do the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. And so for you and my husband and other people, not most people, but other people, you've made the choice of exercising frictionless and without the need for motivation. Maybe you had an initial motivation, but what happens with automatic habits is that you don't need the motivation anymore, because you've set it up so it gets cued and you do the behavior and you get a reward. But most people don't have the personalities or life context. And I talk about that. That's how I start the book.
Wow. So what about willpower? Where does willpower come into the equation here, or does it? For a habiter and an unhabiter?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, we know pretty much that willpower is a strategy that we shouldn't count on, because let me say a couple things about that. Well, first of all, the people who are habiters, research shows that people who successfully form habits tend to have more self-control, which we could think about as willpower. So inherently, people who are habiters, they kind of go hand in hand from my experience. Willpower as a concept, that's part of what I'm calling the old story of behavior change. And the old story of behavior change is based on ideals. It's aiming for a bullseye. It's sticking to the plan, and it's using willpower. So you power through your ambivalence and your lack of motivation, and you just do it. And guess what? It doesn't work for most people for sustainable change. So I don't think willpower is a concept. I think willpower distracts us from what we should be talking about.
Yeah. So what should we be talking about then?
The joy choice, which is what I think we should be talking about, is about the emerging research on the role of our executive functioning, or our brain's innate self-management and decision-making system. Because if we're talking about a choice, we kind of said choices happen in the moment.
Yeah.
And you need an exercise, whether you're a habiter or you're an unhabiter, or you have 10 kids at home, or you're an empty nester and you have all the time in the world. You still need to have plans, because if you don't have a plan, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So the assumption is that someone has a plan to do some kind of exercise or to follow some type of healthier eating plan. That's an assumption. And the other assumption is that to achieve lasting change, you have to make decisions that consistently support your greater eating and exercise goals. Now, consistently support doesn't mean exactly the same. And so if we're going to do that, we have to care about, well, what's going to stop us from being consistent? What's going to stop us from making these consistent choices? And what's going to stop us is an unexpected challenge, or what I call choice points. Yeah. So let's say you had planned to follow a certain eating plan. You were loving it. You feel great. You own it. It's yours. Then you go to a party at your best friend's house, and your best friend comes up with this awesome cake that they baked, and they are insisting you have a piece. And despite not wanting it, despite really not needing to rebel against any shoulds, you eat it, and you eat a big piece because you want to make sure they know that you care about them and you respect them and you love them. So things, when our plans go awry, when we bump up against something that was unexpected, we haven't been taught how to successfully navigate that. So we still stay consistent. We don't have to do it perfectly. And we haven't been taught how to support our brain's self-management system so that we set ourselves up for success. So that's what I think we should be talking about.
I love it. I want to dive more into the joy choice in just a moment, but I wanted to ask you, for someone that is a habiter and an unhabiter, who is more susceptible to having consistent negative behavior patterns in their life?
I don't know. Well, I don't know if I can answer that question, because it's kind of too big of a question. Can you get it a little more specific? You want to get to a little more specific.
Okay. So if someone was, let's just say, a habiter, and they are consistently producing a lot of negative behaviors in their life, whereas someone that is an uninhabiter, they're also producing negative behaviors in their life. Have you seen, through your research over the decades, because you've got a lot of experience here, have you noticed that more people that are habiters are based around the unhealthy behaviors, consistent unhealthy behaviors, or is it more the uninhabiters with the negative behaviors? Does that help concise it a little bit more, or not really?
I think so. Let me say, one thing I want to say is that the habiter-unhabiter concept is a fun category that I created for the purposes of talking about it. I haven't studied, I haven't assessed on a population level, these are habiters and these are unhabiters. It's more of a concept for the individual to say, I've been trying to change my behavior for years and I've not been successful. And I've been trying to do it with discipline, and I've been trying to create automatic habits, and I've been trying to follow the rules that other people are telling me. People who are habiters, I would say, again, this is a typology that I created. If I think about my husband as the embodiment of a habiter, he's very disciplined, and he sets out what he sets out to do, he does. And that is one of the tendencies of this category that of people that I created. But I don't know, we all do unhealthy things. So I think I feel like the directionality of your question, I think, is what's getting in the way of me giving you a very straight answer. I think what we want to do, and also instead of, so I think that's what I'm struggling with, because the reality is that we all have different things we want to achieve in life, right? Now, we could look at a habiter like my husband or someone like him who's super disciplined, exercises every day like they plan to do, high achieving, achieve their professional goals. We're raised in a family that had ambitious goals, successful parents. And in that scenario, I'm leaving the conversation about healthy eating and exercise to kind of try to get at what you're saying. In that situation, we see that a lot of people might have careers that they actually don't want, and they may be successful. Like, I know so many people who went to law school, and became doctors. Doctors in the United States, when people go to medical school, do you know how much money they owe when they get out?
A lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I think no. It tends to be over $1 million in student loans.
Goodness,
that's how I'm not kidding you. That's so that is an example of where someone who is very disciplined and very organized and very successful might be really unhappy because they kind of, again, they succeeded at what they thought they wanted and what maybe they grew up to want, but then they get there and they're like, I don't like this. So it's a different scenario, but it's also showing you how these tendencies could potentially, we might think of someone as, and again, I think my husband is very happy in his high achieving career and his daily exercise, but I could see how someone with the same tendencies that make him a habiter would wind up in a successful career that actually makes them miserable. Yeah. So, but we're off topic. So
I think you did a great job in navigating that curious question of mine. Even though the question might not have made total sense, it made a little bit of sense in my brain, but I think the way I asked it probably didn't. Maybe when I think about it a little bit more, I might have to email you and say, this is where I was going with it.
Sure.
But yeah, thank you for doing that. And your husband literally sounds like an older version of me. In many ways. I'm driven. I got to exercise every single day. I just have that innate ability to get up very early in the morning. What time does he get up in the morning? I'm curious.
5:30.
5:30. Okay, I get up at 4:30 in the morning. So a little bit early, maybe because I'm young. But it's great. I thought I was the only one, to be honest. Someone that sleeps in workout gear.
Well, what a habiter is pretty good at doing is making sure that the circumstances are going, that things won't interfere with what you're trying to do. And that's why he gets up and does it first thing in the morning. That's probably why you get up early too. Do you have kids?
No, I don't.
Okay. So when, that's a strategy. If you've got little kids that can, disrupt your exercise habit, you get up early so that doesn't happen.
Have you got kids?
Yes.
What is it like being a parent and dealing with their habits and their behaviors and the way they change?
That is a great question. I was actually talking to a parenting podcaster earlier in the day, and I have to say that being a parent and reading books about parenting by neuroscientists was really what got me interested in this whole going in this new direction with the brain and executive functioning and emotions and reason. It's people have different needs and personalities, and whether you're married to someone or you have children, there's a push and pull with creating, family values while maintaining your individuality. So when, as a family, because, my husband also happens to be an exercise physiologist. So, he's not just a habiter. He studies exercise for his research. He studies the physiology of exercise. So of course, exercise is very important to him. And I'm a psychologist who cares about sustainable behavior change. So we both know and have had conversations where we want to make sure that our son never feels like sport or exercise is a chore because we want him to do something. And so, today with kids and screen time, it's really, parents have a lot of challenges around this because kids want to sit in front of a screen all the time. Yeah. And yet we want children to be physically active because we know that's among the best things for them. So the challenge is you have to figure out how to encourage it in ways where they don't feel like you're shoving it down their throat. And so taking family walks, biking as a family, shooting hoops. I can tell you a few weeks ago, and we haven't even really talked about what the joy choice is, and I know we don't have that much more time. So I'm going to jump in because I want to tell you a story about my son, which intersects with what we're talking about. So we were talking about how consistent decision-making gets derailed, and it gets derailed by unexpected things get in the way, unless you're a habiter and get up at 4 a.m. when nothing is going to get in the way, right? So the joy choice is the perfect imperfect option that lets us do something instead of nothing. It's the antidote to the all or nothing thinking. Oh no, I can't get to the gym like I had planned. Most people they chuck it and they go, not doing anything. That is one of the biggest derailers of lasting change. So the joy choice aims to help people do something so they can stay consistent. So with my book launch, I've been super busy, and on many days, I haven't been able to take my perfect walk, which is, an hour to campus and back. So a few weeks ago after dinner, I asked my family if we could take a walk around the block, and we're a few minutes into it. It's not a long walk. It's like a 5 to 7 minute walk. And my son kind of cocks his head and looks at me and says, Mom, is this a joy choice for you? He knew that the reason why I had suggested we take a walk was because I couldn't get my ideal walk in. So I had to make the perfect imperfect choice or the joy choice. So it wasn't the ideal, but I got something in instead of nothing. I brought my family along. I was a role model to my son, say, this is worth doing. And guess what? It doesn't have to be perfect. And the fact that my husband, who does all this stuff, perfectly, valued it, it was showing him that even someone like my husband would value doing that.
Well, we try to do things perfectly, but quite often don't.
Yes.
So that's where, just being a bit gracious to ourselves and to other people at the same time, which can be hard because you're so set on things happening your way. But it's being flexible in that respect. But the joy choice, right? Like for someone that doesn't, or is trying to work out, okay, what is joy in the first place, and how much does choice impact that joy aspect?
So choice has tremendous impact on joy. like it has on anything. And, the new research, or I wouldn't say brand new, but emerging research would suggest something very exciting. And that is that, and research on exercise that's not about joy shows this, and research about eating shows this, that what we expect to experience from something, we actually are likely to. So if one study told a group of people that exercise was going to feel good and another group wasn't told that, and the people who were told it was going to feel good actually rated it significantly more pleasurable than the other group. And if you tell people, if you look at foods, if you look at the same, like soup, there was a study, I think it was soup, and one called it boiled vegetable water, one frame, one label, and the other was sophisticated vegetable, soup, I don't know, whatever word. And they found that the people who were told, the fancy name for the exact same thing rated it as more tasty, had more. And so going back to your question, our choices and what we expect them to deliver actually gets our brain to anticipate. And then it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm. Where do you want people to get a copy of your book?
They can go to my website. I believe in Australia, I believe there are some stores online selling it, in the UK and in Europe, you can get it online, and in the United States too. And in it's in a lot of local bookstores in the United States.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to have to suss out here in Australia because I love going to bookstores. But like I said to you off air, I live in a new area, so I'm still trying to work out where everything is properly. So I can't wait till I find a proper bookstore and I do see it, because I love seeing all my friends' books in stores, and I tend to be the one, if it's hidden away somewhere, I tend to be the one that grabs it and puts it out the front just casually. Because why not, right? People need to read the book. So I'll make sure that everyone knows where to get a copy of it. Michelle, I got 2 quick final questions for you, if that's okay with you. What do you love the most about yourself and your story?
Wow. You're very good questions. What do I love most about myself and my story? I think that I have created my own path, that I have followed my interests. And if it meant I had to get another graduate degree, that's what I did. That I like to integrate ideas, and that I want to help people. I guess that's what I would say. And that I try to learn from my mistakes and be kind to people.
I love that. My final question for you, Michelle, this is my all-time favorite question. I love asking all my guests at the very end. It is a hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument. But they've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
Wow. That I was a good daughter, mother, wife, friend, that I want to show the things that I've created, and I would want to show the people that I've impacted. I would want to show me playing with my dog, eating good food, traveling to Australia, a mix of pleasurable things and contributions. I think that's what I would want.
It's a perfect send-off message. Michelle, thank you so much for your time today, for writing The Joy Choice. Cannot wait to get my hands on a copy of it. But thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom, your advice, and the stories as well, and for joining me today on the Storybox podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to meet you.